In this video, we want to learn some basic skills about materials and textures, how to add multiple textures to one object, how to create thickness just for visualization for objects, and how to deal with more complex objects regarding the mapping of your textures. I've set up my scene in meters. I already created one box with 1 by 1 meters. I just create another box with 2 by 2 meters. I changed to perspective and changed to rendered views, and we will have a look at our first material right now. The next thing, we will go to material and we will choose our first material from the material library, and under pattern we choose the diamond tiles because the diamond tiles is really good to look at because it's a really simple material. Under color you see the texture. I double click on it and you are just in the texture menu right now. By the way, also on the top you see the hierarchy. You see this is the material. I click on the material and I can go down to the texture a level with double clicking on the texture, and if you want to go back to the material you just click on the higher hierarchy. I have several methods to apply the material to the object. I can say right mouse click, assign to object, assign to layers of object, assign to layers in general. I can also just drag and drop, which I do right now. I just drag and drop both to my cubes. So far the result doesn't look good, so we have to look at the texture mapping. I just click on the texture, and I'm not now on the texture hierarchy. And in Rhino it's like this. The default mapping method is the world coordinate system. And this just means that the texture will be shown in real world scale. So if this is our texture 100 by 100 pixel, you can just set in the mapping how big this texture should be, and you just have to be aware of we are in meters. So if I just change the size, so far the size is 2 centimeters. If I change the size to 1 by 1 in X and Y direction, then you can see that it already looks quite well. Because this cube is 1 by 1 meter, the texture only fits on the cube once, and the 2 by 2 obviously 4 cubes or 4 textures fit on one surface. And if I change to a world coordinate without the box die, you can see that this is a projection on one side, and you can see that the black edge is just like a beamer projection goes along the other sides. From underneath it just looks like from the top. If you go to screen, I think normally this doesn't make much sense. You can just see that the texture always looks in the direction on the screen, and environment is not really important to us. So I think most of the time you would like to work with a world coordinate system in terms of box style. Everything I change on this level is related to all objects which have this material. So if you want to work on a more complex level, you have to change to mapping channel, and we will have a look at this a little bit later. What you can do is you can change the position of the object. For example, if I just say I want to move this 50 centimeters in X direction, then it just moves 50 centimeters in X direction. You can also just say that you want to connect X and Y, so they move in X and Y direction together like this, and now you see that the mapping moved. You can also rotate it, for example, to 45 degrees, and I just change this again, and I go to 0. And also interesting to see it once, if you click on no repeat, you can just see that it's one texture and everything else is a tiling on the texture around the object. Okay, I want to add another material. I go again into import for material libraries because these materials already have nice textures. I go into floor, into wood, and I will just choose a quite pronounced material like this carpet one here. This looks good. And I just apply it to my objects. Looks good. And we will have a look at some other options. Sometimes you have objects, and these objects don't have a material thickness, and you would like to visualize it with a thickness. So you can just select the object, and under the property hierarchy you can just go into thickness and you just activate the thickness. And remember, we are in meters, so if there's a thickness of 0.1, this means we have a thickness of 0.1 centimeters. Of 10 centimeters, this is a thickness of 5 centimeters. You can set it to solid or not solid, so it just has an inset of 5 centimeters. And you can also just say you want to have the same thing in both sides, so now it's 10 centimeters in both sides, and that's really handy. What's also really handy is that you can have edge softening. If you just switch this on, then something does not look good because it didn't do anything. I just go into force softening, and you see there is a mistake. The reason why there is a mistake that 10 centimeters is just too much. If I just go and just say 0.1, then it looks much better. You can even say 0.2. And this looks really good. So also new in Rhino, you have this edge softening, which makes it really interesting. And you can also just say chamfer, and so it's more like a chamfer edge. And if you change your visualization properly to a proper ray trace visualization, then this looks already quite good. Here you can see the result in ray traced, and the box without the setting thickness and without the rounded edges, and here with, and this is a big improvement for visualizations. Also new in Rhino 6, and really important and interesting, that you can select with string shift surfaces of one object. That's normal. But you can also just give several surfaces in one object different kind of materials. I just go into properties and say materials, and here instead of the applied material, I just say I want to have this diamond time. I select it, and you can see that it works really well. So whatever kind of object you have, you can give different kind of materials to one object. Okay, I changed my viewport again to rendered, and I just convert my poly surface to a mesh like this. I move my poly surface to the left. Here's my poly surface object. You can see open poly surface and my mesh object. If I just select one surface with string shift, you can see that I can still choose a material. If I do the same thing with my mesh object, you can see that there is no option to choose a sub-object material, so this is something you can't do with a mesh object. What you can still do is you can add thickness, and you can add the soft edging, but something like this, having a sub-object material with a mesh, is not possible. Another interesting thing might be decals. I just changed from ray trace to rendered because in ray trace mode I think you can't see the decals. A decal is a texture which you can put on your surface wherever you want to, so it's not related to a whole polygon. I just select the object, I just go into decal plus, and I add this logo. The logo has a black area. The black area can be the transparent area. I just say okay, I open it, and I go into a vertical because I want to put it on this side. I snap to my first area of the object, second, And here you can see that I can just position the logo. I finished this right now. And then you have a different kind of settings. You can put it to the front, to the back. I'm not really sure what adds it on both sides of forward and backward. I could imagine if you don't want this, then you need separate objects because this is one object. I just go into the setting, and if I use a color mask and click OK, then you can see that it is actually transparent. You can move the decal. Furthermore, you just click on this Show Decal widget. And now I can grab this and I can move it up. I can move it in all directions wherever I want to have this. Certain things only work with open poly surface. If I just create out of this open poly surface a mesh object, just move the open poly surface to the left. This is my mesh. Then you can see that there are all the properties like thickness and edge softening. But if I just select one surface, you can see that I can't apply a texture only to one surface of one object. If I do the same thing with the open poly surface, you can see that I can still add another material to my surface, but this is not possible with a mesh object. So far, all my objects were mapped with one material in world coordinate system, and they were all boxes, so the box style works perfectly. But what would it look like if you just choose a sphere, a cylinder, or more complex objects? And there's a nice plugin for this. It's called a polyhedron. Here you have many different kind of shapes, and I just choose this one and I draw it next to my cylinder, somehow like this, and I also add this material. And you have the possibility to change the material on the object level. So first of all, I choose my box, and if you go from box to texture mapping, then you see something like a warning. You are not able to change the settings properly because you are still in world coordinate system. So you have to change this in your mapping mode if you want to work on a more complex method of mapping on the object level. So I go back to material and I change in the texture color my mapping method from world coordinate system to mapping channel, somewhere like this. And now again I go back to my properties, and I'm back on the properties for my cube, and I don't see this warning anymore. So let's have a look at the box. I just go into properties and now again into texture mapping. I don't have this warning anymore. Obviously the best setting for the type is not surface, but it's box. If I move it to box, then it still doesn't look really well, because if you count them, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stripes. And if I go back to materials, then you see that the mapping channel is one repetition, and the whole thing, if you look at this, should actually have 9 stripes. So I have to do one thing. I go back to properties, and you have to apply a box mapping. So we click on apply box mapping, and it asks for the first corner, somewhere like this, asks for the second corner, and now for the top corner, and then it asks me if I want to close it with a cap. Yes, I want to do this, and you press enter, and then it looks the expected way. I have 9 stripes up there, and so it's perfectly adjusted. If I would go and change the repetition here, go to 2, and in X direction and V in Y direction, then you can see that at the end of the day you have 18. I just change it again to 1, repetition 1. I go back to properties, and you can see that you have the possibility to change the same settings on the object level. If you worked with a mapping channel, you have to be aware of that this is not working with the wheel scale anymore, but it's working with the tiling. So if there is 1 by 1, this just means over the whole mapping structure, the texture will be with a factor of 1. And if you increase it with 2, then you have the whole thing 2 by 2 by 2. So it just adds, it's not related to the dimension of your texture anymore. It's related to the object. So if I go back to my properties, then you can increase the repetition. You can increase it in U, V, and W. It's more or less like X, Y, and Z. So I want to increase it, and my recommendation is to switch on lock. If you don't do this, then you see what is happening. I just can increase it in X direction. You can't see it with this kind of texture, and increase it with V direction, and then you can see that it doubles. Z direction, it doesn't do anything because the two-dimensional texture. I go back to 1 and 1. I just click on lock, and now I just say 2, and you can just see that it just increased the amount of stripes. You could also change you can scale the texture on this level. For example, here again I switch on lock, so in X, Y, and Z direction it does the same. I click on 2, and then I'm back on my 9 stripes. I think it doesn't make sense to work with both. I would concentrate on one, probably best case on the U, V, and W repetition. And what you should be aware of, it doesn't do anything to the other objects, which is really good. So you can have one texture for several kind of objects, and you don't have to be afraid of that anything will change with the other objects. This is really good. If you would do the same thing, for example, on the mapping level in the texture, you can see that it has an impact on all the others. So don't do this, or it's better not to do it. It's better to do it on object level. What probably makes also sense is that you can move it in X and Y direction. For example, I can just say I go up 20 centimeters, and can also do it in Z direction. You will not see it because it looks quite similar. You can also turn it, and don't turn it in X and Y direction, only turn it in W or Z direction. This is something you will see. The others don't have an impact. If I just say here, it has, by the way, an impact, but at the end of the day, from my point of view, it only makes sense to turn it in W direction. Okay, it's the same thing with the sphere. If I just select the sphere, you obviously have to change to spherical. You can also do it while this applies spherical mapping. So I first choose the center of the bounding box, and let's see, now this is center, and then you have to get the surface, and you just have to see what kind of what do I have to set up in my snipping to actually catch it. I think this looks really good. Okay, here we go. You just didn't see much difference right now, because just surface mapping looks quite similar to the spherical mapping. But if I change it to box, then you can definitely see a bigger difference. The same with the cylinder. If you just choose the cylinder, and here again you just say you draw your cylinder mapping. First it asks for the radius. I just click on near and then I go up. Then it asks for capped, yes or no. I just click on the no, which is wrong. Then you can just see that the top is not projected properly. I just do it again and I just click on centered, then on the outside and then the top, and now I say yes and the top looks really good. Okay, nearly at the end, let's have a look at more complex objects like this polyhedra. I just select it, and of course you can change settings to box, to spherical, and things like this. And there's one setting I would like to show you. If you go through all these hierarchies, there is this UV editor. I first go again to box and I click on UV editor, and it asks you to draw a surface. I go to my first point and then my second point, and here we go. You see an unwrapping of my object. I can select this and I move this a little bit, and we just have to see which kind of surfaces these are. By the way, I would like to see something which is probably better to see from the front, for example like this one. And if I turn this, you can see that it also turns on my object. If I hold my shift key, then I can also scale it in all dimensions. And you can see that this is a good way of optimizing the texture for more complex objects. I hold my shift and so where was it? It's here. I hold my shift key and I scale it, and I make it a little bit smaller. I probably also reposition it somewhere like this, and I turn it, and this is a way of adjusting the material. There's also one other thing I can do. I would like to show you, but first these are the settings for your UV editor. You have to apply or you have to cancel, but just don't leave the menu without applying or canceling. I just click on cancel again, and I go back to my object. And if you go on unwrap, then you can choose seams. I just click on this, for example, this hexagon, and I just follow another seam, for example, somewhere like this. Okay, and if I finished, then I just click enter. Doesn't look good right now, but if I go again into my mapping and into my UV editor, then I draw my surface again, and then you can just see that the seams I set up is exactly what you can see on the unwrap of my surface. So this is a really good way of controlling all the elements, and I just choose this one. I again hold my shift key and can scale it. I think my seam was not such great, but you probably get an idea of that the combination of these methods can be really successful if you set up your seams properly. Again, apply, and here we go. Before we finish this video, we want to see what all objects look like if I export them, for example, to a program like Twinmotion. And you can see that I just added another cube with this checker material, and the checker material is in world coordinate system style. All the other materials are still in texture mapping channel, and I just choose this cube, and this cube will also get a thickness, but be careful, the thickness okay, the thickness of one of 10 centimeters is fine, that's quite a lot. But if I go in edge softening, then it's important that you just see that it has a proper value in this terms of 2 centimeters, otherwise it wouldn't work. So there is this one with this multi textures, two textures on one object and the decal, and so select everything. I just go into export selected, and I just call it test 0.2 as an FBX a motion builder, and I just go into save. I keep all the settings here. Here I just keep the setting more polygons because I want to have the sphere nice and round. By the way, there's also a more detailed control field, but I keep it with more polygons, and I click on OK. And now I'm in Twinmotion, and I just select this object, and I just say here collapse by material, and let's see where they are. This looks already really good. For example, what looks really well is the thickness of this cube. It's amazing because I didn't model this, it's just a material setting, and you can just see that in Twinmotion you can use this material setting. What doesn't look so well is this one, but that's really simple. In Twinmotion you just have to select the material and just go into two-sided, sorry, it was the wrong one. I just go into two-sided on. But what doesn't work is the decals. The decals are gone. Plus, what doesn't work is the top. The multi-sub-object surfaces also doesn't work. And on top, if you compare this cube to the Rhino cube, you can also see that the texture is different. I just change again to Rhino. You can see it looks differently. It's the other way around. So what I have to do is I want to do some changes. I just select this, and I go into my properties box mapping, and I just give this the proper bounding box. Select this one and then go up and say cap yes. The next thing I do is I just select all objects, and I just say explode, because when I explode these surfaces you can just see that it kept the texture, but then I have the chance that I can see the whole thing also in Twinmotion like this. So next thing, I select everything and I just export it again, export selected, and I export it to the same name, same file name. I just say yes, I want to override it, and I go to Twinmotion, and the only thing I do in Twinmotion is I just refresh my FBX import. And here you can see that my mapping works really well if you use the right mapping channel and the bounding box probably in Rhino. I can even see the top surface just because I exploded my object before I exported this. The only thing which doesn't work is the decal, but I can live with this, especially when I know that in Twinmotion putting decals on my objects is a really easy thing.